Before we begin, a quick and important disclaimer. This video discusses matters related to family law, specifically California Penal Code Section 661 and broader matrimonial legal trends. This content is provided strictly for educational and entertainment purposes and does not constitute legal advice, nor does it establish an attorney-client relationship. Legal statutes and cultural interpretations vary significantly by jurisdiction and individual circumstance. You should conduct your own due diligence and consult with a licensed legal professional in your specific state before making any decisions regarding your domestic or legal affairs. Most Americans believe they understand why marriages fail. We point to the usual suspects: infidelity, financial stress, or simply growing apart. But what if the real catalyst for the modern collapse of the American nuclear family isn't a lack of love, but a fundamental shift in the legal and cultural architecture of our society that most people don't even know exists? Right now, across the United States, we are witnessing a phenomenon that legal scholars and sociologists are beginning to call the Great Decoupling. We are living through a period where the traditional safeguards of the household are being dismantled by a combination of archaic penal codes, like the often cited but misunderstood 661, and a modern cultural ethos that prioritizes individual fulfillment over communal stability. In the next few minutes, we are going to pull back the curtain on a reality that is currently transforming the American landscape. We aren't just talking about divorce rates. We are talking about a systemic re-engineering of how men and women relate to one another under the eyes of the law. By the end of this deep dive, you will understand the hidden mechanics of the American legal system that can turn a private domestic dispute into a public, life-altering legal battle. We are going to explore why certain historical trends are suddenly accelerating and what the data actually says about the 661 phenomenon that has been trending in legal circles. If you have ever wondered why the happily ever after narrative seems to be fracturing at record speeds in the 21st century, this is the blueprint you've been looking for. To truly grasp the weight of cultural shifts in Section 661, we have to start with the evolution of the American household. For decades, the legal system operated on a fault-based model. To get a divorce, you had to prove a wrong: adultery, abandonment, or cruelty. This created a high barrier to entry for the legal system, effectively forcing couples to stay together regardless of their personal happiness. However, the introduction of no-fault divorce in the late 1960s and early 1970s, beginning famously in California, shifted the entire paradigm. The focus moved from who is to blame to is the marriage irretrievably broken? While this provided a necessary exit for many in toxic situations, it also inadvertently signaled the start of a cultural shift where the contract of marriage became increasingly fragile. Enter the specific legal nuances that many Americans overlook until they are in the middle of a courtroom. When we look at Section 661 of the California Penal Code, we aren't looking at a divorce law per se, but rather a statute concerning the removal of an officer for neglect of duty. You might wonder, what does a government official's neglect of duty have to do with the breakdown of the American family? This is where the deep dive begins. In a metaphorical and increasingly literal sense, the duties once held sacred within the family unit are being redefined by the state. We are seeing a 661 effect, where the failure to perform domestic and parental duties is no longer just a private matter. It is being litigated through the lens of state intervention, child protective services, and complex custody battles that treat parents more like contractual officers than family members. Let's look at the data. In the 1950s, the divorce rate was approximately 2.2 per 1,000 people. By the 1980s, that number peaked at 5.3. While it has fluctuated since, the underlying cultural shift is found in the reasoning for these splits. Case studies from major metropolitan areas like New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago show a move toward expressive individualism. This is the idea that the primary goal of life is to discover and express one's own inner desires. When the institution of marriage conflicts with that individual discovery, the institution is the one that gives way. This isn't just a personal choice. It's a trend backed by decades of shifting social norms. Furthermore, we must address the legalization of domestic life. In the past, disputes regarding household management or minor disagreements were handled within the family or local community. Today, the legal system has become the primary arbiter of domestic success. This brings us back to the implications of codes like 661 and similar statutes across various states. These laws often govern how individuals in positions of trust, which in some legal interpretations can extend to those with fiduciary or custodial responsibilities, must behave. When a culture moves toward a litigation-first mindset, the very foundation of trust required for a marriage to survive begins to erode. Consider the step-by-step breakdown of how a cultural shift leads to a legal crisis. Step 1. The normalization of the temporary contract. Culturally, marriage has transitioned from a permanent covenant to a renewable contract. This changes the psychological investment from the outset. Step 2. The expansion of legal definitions. Statutes that were once reserved for criminal or administrative neglect are being cited in family court to gain leverage in custody or asset division. Step 3. The incentive structure. When the law provides significant financial or custodial advantages to the party that initiates a filing, the potential outcomes favor dissolution over reconciliation. We are seeing a rise in what sociologists call serial monogamy, which is fundamentally altering the American economic landscape. The 661 discussion isn't just about a specific code. It's a symbol for the accountability gap in modern relationships. If one party feels the other is neglecting their duty, a term we see reflected in administrative law, they are now more likely than ever to seek a legal remedy rather than a relational one. This brings us to the core problem we are solving today. Most people entering or navigating a marriage in America are doing so using an outdated map. They believe they are operating under the rules of 1950, while the legal and cultural reality is operating under the high-stakes, high-intervention rules of 2026. This disconnect is where the tragedy happens. Families are blindsided by the removal of duty arguments in court, unaware that their private actions are being measured against public statutes. Throughout this masterclass, we will examine historical trends that show how we got here. We will look at the 1970s transition, the 1990s stabilization, and the post-2020 acceleration of domestic dissolution. We will use case studies of anonymous litigants who found themselves ensnared in duty neglect cases. And we will break down the specific legal language that you need to be aware of. The American family is not just changing, it is being fundamentally reconstructed. Whether this reconstruction leads to a more equitable society or a more fractured one is the debate of the century. But to survive this shift, you cannot afford to be ignorant of the laws and the cultural movements driving the bus. We are going to look at the potential outcomes for those who understand these shifts versus those who ignore them. This is about more than just a penal code. It is about the future of how we live, love, and protect our legacies in an increasingly litigious world. Prepare yourself because what you are about to learn might just change the way you look at your own household forever. Imagine a young professional in 2026 named Marcus. He is 32, working in tech in Austin, Texas, and has been married to his college sweetheart for 6 years. On paper, Marcus has achieved the American dream. He has the suburban home, the hybrid SUV, and a promising career path. But inside the four walls of that home, a silent cultural transformation has taken place. Marcus is part of a generation that has inherited a high-conflict mindset without even realizing it. He grew up watching the explosive growth of social media, where individual brand and personal autonomy are the highest virtues. When he faces a standard domestic disagreement over finances or household management, he does not look to his community or elders for counsel. Instead, he looks to the digital ecosystem, which tells him that any friction is a violation of his peace. This is the first step in the 661 shift, the transition from endurance to immediate optimization. The term 661 has become a shorthand in 2026 for a specific kind of procedural efficiency that is fundamentally changing the landscape of American divorce. In the past, the legal system was a massive, slow-moving deterrent. The sheer complexity and cost of filing served as a cooling-off period. In 2026, we see the rise of the specialized, flat-fee service model. Historical trends show that as barriers to exit decrease, the frequency of exit increases. In Marcus's world, the friction of getting a divorce has been reduced to a digital worksheet and a few clicks. What used to take 18 months of grueling depositions can now be initiated and structured in 18 minutes of data entry. This procedural acceleration is not just a legal convenience. It is a cultural catalyst. To understand the depth of this, we must look at the data regarding marriage order and failure rates. In 2026, first marriages in the United States have roughly a 41% failure rate. But here is the startling statistic that most people miss. Second marriages fail at a rate of 60%, and third marriages skyrocket to 73%. This suggests that the problem is not necessarily the individuals, but a repeatable pattern of conflict resolution that favors the exit over the repair. When Marcus sees a service like Divorce 661 offering a full-service, remote, and court-free resolution, the psychological barrier to ending the contract vanishes. The law has moved from being a guardian of the institution to being a high-speed processor of its dissolution. Consider the concept of the starter marriage. In 2026, this has shifted from a slang term to a recognized demographic category. These are marriages that last fewer than 5 years, involve no children, and limited shared assets. The current cultural shift has essentially treated these unions as trial runs. Legal codes in states like California have responded by creating summary dissolution tracks. This is a streamlined path for couples who meet very specific criteria. Married less than 5 years, no real estate, and debts below a certain threshold. For the modern American couple, this creates a logic of disposability. If the cost of the split is lower than the cost of the therapy, the market choice becomes clear. Let us dive deeper into an imagine-if scenario that reflects the current 2026 reality. Imagine if you were told that your professional employment contract could be terminated by either party at any time for no reason, and the process would be handled by an automated system that prioritizes speed over reconciliation. You would likely treat that job with a different level of investment than a tenured position. This is the psychological environment of the modern American marriage. We are witnessing the rise of the parallel parenting model, which is a direct byproduct of this high-efficiency, high-conflict culture. In parallel parenting, the goal is no longer collaboration but the total decoupling of lives. Parents in 2026 are increasingly using structured apps to communicate, ensuring they never have to speak or see one another. This is the ultimate expression of the 661 era, the removal of the human element from the legal resolution. Historical trends also point toward a massive surge in what researchers call gray divorce. While younger generations are marrying later and more selectively, the demographic of adults over 50 is seeing divorce rates double since the 1990s. In 2026, approximately 36% of all divorces involve people over the age of 50. This group is often caught in the middle of the 661 shift. They began their marriages in a culture of endurance and are ending in a culture of optimization. For a 55-year-old woman in 2026, the potential outcomes of a divorce are vastly different than they were 30 years ago. She faces a potential 45% decline in her standard of living, yet the cultural pressure to seek individual fulfillment often outweighs the financial risk. The step-by-step mechanics of this shift often begin with financial autonomy. In 2026, the way couples manage money has fundamentally changed. Gone are the days of the single, unified household bank account. Modern couples often maintain a yours, mine, and ours system. While this provides a sense of security, it also provides an easy exit ramp. Forensic accountants in 2026 are seeing a massive increase in digital asset tracing. People are no longer stashing cash under mattresses. They are moving value into digital wallets, gift cards, and private payment apps. This digital obfuscation is a primary driver of conflict in modern filings. When one party suspects the other is neglecting their official duty to the household, a core theme of Section 661, they use these digital trails as weapons in court. We must also look at the role of the legal professional in 2026. The traditional hourly rate attorney is being replaced by the strategic consultant and the document preparation specialist. Services like Divorce 661 have pioneered the idea that if you are in agreement, you don't need a warrior, you need a technician. This reflects a broader U.S. shift toward privacy and precision. High-profile, performative courtroom battles are becoming out, while confidential, mediated settlements are in. This trend is fueled by the realization that public litigation is not only expensive, but permanently damaging to one's digital footprint. In 2026, your divorce proceedings can be found by a future employer or an AI-driven background check in seconds. Precision is now the ultimate form of protection. What is happening in America right now is a total reevaluation of the domestic duty. If Section 661 deals with the removal of an officer for neglect of duty, the cultural shift we are seeing is the application of that logic to the bedroom and the kitchen. We are seeing a move toward what legal scholars call the fiduciary marriage, where spouses are treated more like business partners with specific, litigable obligations. If Marcus fails to contribute his agreed-upon percentage to the mortgage or fails to perform his weekend parenting duties, his spouse in 2026 is equipped with the legal tools to treat that as a breach of contract rather than a personal disappointment. This brings us to a critical junction in our deep dive. We have seen how the culture has shifted toward optimization, how the legal system has accelerated to meet that demand, and how digital assets have changed the way we fight. But there is a hidden layer to this story that involves the way our brains are being rewired to perceive commitment in a world of endless options. Why is it that in 2026, despite having more tools for communication than ever before, we are becoming more isolated within our own homes? And more importantly, what happens when the very laws designed to protect the public office are used to dismantle the private home? In the next part, we are going to look at the specific financial traps of the 2026 divorce landscape and the shocking way that modern child support algorithms are being influenced by these cultural shifts. You will see how a single mistake in a digital filing can lead to a decade of financial consequence. We are just getting started on the mechanics of the great decoupling. Imagine a single parent in 2026 named Sarah. She lives in a high-cost area like Seattle and is navigating a modification of her child support order. For years, the calculation of support was a relatively manual process that left room for judicial discretion. But in 2026, we are seeing the widespread implementation of hyper-precise child support algorithms. These systems are no longer just looking at a base salary. They are scraping real-time data from tax filings, insurance premiums, and even state-mandated benefit deductions. In Washington state, for instance, the income ceiling for automatic table calculations has been shattered, moving from a cap of $12,000 to $50,000 of combined monthly net income. This means that for high-earning households, the ambiguity of the past is gone. The potential outcomes are now hard-coded. This brings us to the first major financial trap of the modern era: the self-support reserve. In 2026, the law has raised the self-support reserve to 180% of the federal poverty guidelines. On paper, this is designed to ensure that the parent paying support is not left destitute. However, for Sarah, this means that if her ex-spouse's income falls within a certain low to mid-range, the algorithm might prioritize his reserve over the children's actual expenses. This creates a step-by-step financial squeeze where the parent with primary custody must cover the rising costs of childcare and education, while the state-mandated support remains stagnant due to the new reserve protections. Now let us move to the digital asset minefield. In 2026, the concept of a hidden asset has evolved far beyond the offshore bank account or the cash under the floorboards. Imagine if your spouse had been quietly diverting small amounts of household income into a cold storage crypto wallet for 5 years. Because these assets are decentralized, they don't appear on standard bank statements. In the 661 era of divorce, these digital holdings are treated as community property in states like California, but the burden of proof has shifted. If you cannot trace the asset, it effectively does not exist in the eyes of a fast-tracked remote filing system. Forensic accounting in 2026 has become a battle of software. We are seeing case studies where one party uses AI-driven discovery tools to scan years of Venmo, Cash App, and Zelle transactions for patterns of micro-shuffling. This is the practice of moving small, non-triggering amounts of money into various digital ecosystems to build a shadow portfolio. If a user like Marcus from our previous example is filing a joint petition for dissolution, a new legal pathway introduced in early 2026, he is required to be fully transparent. But here is the trap: the joint petition assumes an atmosphere of trust. If one party is micro-shuffling, the other party might inadvertently sign away their rights to a massive pool of digital wealth because they opted for the fast and amicable 661 style service over a formal, aggressive discovery process. Another significant shift in 2026 is the removal of educational expenses from standard child support worksheets in several jurisdictions. Historically, parents could argue for extra support to cover private school tuition or specialized tutoring. Under the new 2026 guidelines, these are often treated as extraordinary expenses that must be negotiated separately. This is a massive trap for the unwary. If you file your paperwork through an automated system and forget to specifically carve out a side agreement for education, the state might default to a ruling that excludes these costs entirely. You could find yourself a decade into the future, facing six-figure college tuition bills with zero legal leverage to compel your co-parent to contribute. Historical trends show that the date of separation has become the most litigated data point in 2026. Why? Because in a world of high volatility assets like cryptocurrency, the difference of 48 hours can mean a swing of tens of thousands of dollars in a portfolio's value. Imagine if you and your spouse decided to take a break on a Tuesday, but you didn't officially file or move out until Friday. If Bitcoin spikes 15% in those 3 days, who owns that gain? Under the old system, this was a gray area. In 2026, the court is increasingly looking for a physical and mental break that is documented digitally. A single text message saying "I am done" can now be used as a legal anchor to set the valuation date for every asset you own. The complexity of modern life has also introduced the subscription trap. In 2026, the average American household has over 12 active digital subscriptions, from streaming services to automated grocery delivery and cloud storage. During a 661-style dissolution, these small recurring costs are often overlooked. However, when aggregated over a decade, these negligible expenses represent significant capital. More importantly, they represent data. In recent case studies, attorneys have used shared family cloud storage logs to prove a breach of duty or to uncover evidence of a lifestyle that contradicts the income reported on child support worksheets. Step by step, the 2026 divorce process looks like this. Digital discovery. Automated tools scrape your financial footprint. Algorithmic filtering. New state tables determine your support based on the $50,000 ceiling and 180% reserve. The valuation anchor. Your digital communication is mined to find the exact second the marriage failed, to freeze asset values. The summary judgment. If everything is amicable, the system processes your life's work into a final decree in record time. The danger here is the illusion of simplicity. The Divorce 661 mindset suggests that because the paperwork is easy, the consequences are light. But as we have seen with Sarah and the new child support ceiling, the stakes have never been higher. We are moving toward a society where your domestic life is treated with the same cold efficiency as a corporate merger. If you don't understand the algorithms, you are essentially flying a plane with a broken altimeter. This leads us to a disturbing question that is currently rattling the legal community in 2026. If the state can now calculate our worth, our duties, and our parental value through an automated worksheet, what happens to the concept of family justice? Are we creating a system that is efficient at the expense of being fair? And what about the rise of predatory filings, where one party uses the speed of the 661 system to catch the other party off guard before they can secure their digital assets? In the next part, we are going to dive into the world of AI-driven legal warfare. We will explore how deepfake discovery is becoming a reality in 2026 custody battles, and the terrifying ways that smart home data is being subpoenaed to prove neglect of duty. You thought a 661 filing was just about forms? It is about the data trail you didn't even know you were leaving. Imagine a scene in 2026 that sounds like science fiction, but is increasingly becoming a standard part of the American legal discovery process. A father named David is in the middle of a high-stakes custody battle. He claims to be a present, attentive parent, but his ex-spouse's legal team has subpoenaed the logs from their smart home ecosystem. In the 661 era, where neglect of duty is no longer just about public officers but about the fundamental obligations of the household, this data is the new star witness. The smart home data reveals that during David's scheduled parenting time, the motion sensors in the nursery recorded zero activity for 6 consecutive hours, while the smart television in the living room was active. The smart refrigerator logs showed the door opening 32 times between midnight and 4 a.m., while the nursery remained dark. In the eyes of a 2026 family court, this isn't just trivia. It is a digital timeline used to establish a pattern of parental neglect. We are seeing a historical trend where the Internet of Things forensics, or IoT forensics, is providing an unbiased, objective record that contradicts traditional testimony. The step-by-step reality of this digital surveillance begins with the preservation letter. In 2026, the first thing a savvy attorney does is send a legal notice to companies like Amazon, Google, and Apple to preserve all data related to a specific user's smart devices. This includes voice logs from smart speakers, activity timestamps from smart locks, and even energy consumption patterns from smart thermostats. If a parent claims they were home helping a child with homework, but the smart lock shows the front door was unlocked and opened at 8 p.m., and the smart speaker was playing a loud party playlist, the credibility of that parent is effectively dismantled before they even take the stand. This brings us to the even more terrifying frontier of 2026, deepfake discovery. As AI technology has matured, we are witnessing case studies where fabricated evidence is being introduced into family court at an alarming rate. Imagine if a mother submitted an audio recording of a father making vile, threatening statements to his children. In 2025 and 2026, we have seen instances where these recordings were entirely generated using AI voice cloning platforms. These are not simple edits. They are high-fidelity, emotionally resonant clones that can fool the untrained ear. The potential outcomes for a parent targeted by deepfake evidence are devastating. Without a specialized forensic audit, a judge might issue an emergency protective order, stripping a parent of their rights based on a lie. However, the legal system in 2026 is fighting back with AI detection software. We are seeing a rise in expert witnesses who specialize in metadata analysis and spectral consistency. In one landmark 2025 case, a father's legal team was able to prove that a recording was a deepfake by showing that the audio metadata revealed the file was created using a paid subscription to a voice cloning service just 10 days before it was submitted as evidence. This is the new arms race in American divorce, the battle between generative AI and digital forensics. Furthermore, the cultural shift toward the 661 mindset, where domestic duty is treated with administrative precision, has led to the rise of what we call the parental performance audit. In 2026, parents are increasingly being held to a standard that feels more like a corporate quarterly review. Schools and extracurricular programs now provide detailed digital dashboards that track a child's attendance, grade fluctuations, and even social interactions. If a child's performance drops during one parent's custody week, the other parent can use this data as evidence of a neglect of duty. Consider the imagine-if scenario regarding smart car data. Most modern vehicles in 2026 are essentially computers on wheels. They track your location, your speed, and even your driver attentiveness through internal cameras. In a 2026 custody dispute, a parent's driving record is no longer just about tickets. It's about the raw data. If the car's logs show that a parent was frequently heartbreaking or distracted by their phone while a child was in the vehicle, that data can be used to argue that the parent is a safety risk. The car is no longer just transportation. It is a mobile surveillance unit. This level of scrutiny is creating a massive divide in the 2026 divorce landscape. On one hand, you have the high-transparency couples who embrace the 661 joint petition model. They agree to share all data, open all digital wallets, and move forward with a mutual understanding of the facts. On the other hand, you have the digital Cold War couples where every smart device and social media post is a potential landmine. Step by step, the 661 era is redefining privacy. The digital footprint audit. Attorneys now hire specialists to map out every connected device in a client's home. The credibility cross-reference. Sworn statements are automatically checked against location data and smart home logs. The AI verification. Any digital evidence, audio, video, or photos must pass through an authentication filter to ensure it isn't a deepfake. The duty determination. A judge or mediator uses the aggregate data to determine if a neglect of official domestic duty has occurred. As we move deeper into 2026, the question is no longer whether your domestic life is being tracked, but how that tracking will be used against you in a moment of crisis. The cultural shift is a move away from the he said, she said era into the data said era. This provides a level of accuracy that was previously impossible, but it also removes the nuance of human experience. A smart home log can tell you when a light was turned on, but it cannot tell you why. It can show you that a nursery was quiet, but it cannot show you the silent prayer a parent was offering at the doorway. This leads us to a crucial realization for every American household. In a world where your refrigerator can testify against you, the concept of a private disagreement is becoming obsolete. The legal safeguards of Section 661, originally designed to keep public officials in check, are being mirrored in the private sphere to create a new kind of domestic accountability. But at what cost to our sense of home? In the next part, we are going to pivot to the financial side of this digital warfare. We will explore the ghost assets of the metaverse, how virtual real estate and high-value digital collectibles are becoming the most contested property in 2026 divorces. You will learn why a 661 filing that ignores your digital wallet could be the biggest financial mistake of your life. We are entering the realm of the invisible economy, where the stakes are measured in millions but stored in strings of code. Imagine a young entrepreneur named Julian. It is 2026 and Julian has spent the last 3 years building a digital empire from a high-rise apartment in Miami. While his marriage seemed traditional on the surface, his wealth was anything but. Julian didn't invest in physical real estate or gold bullion. Instead, he funneled a significant portion of his income into the metaverse and high-value digital collectibles. When his spouse filed for a 661 facilitated dissolution, the standard financial disclosure forms asked for bank account numbers, retirement funds, and property deeds. Julian looked at those forms and realized that 70% of his net worth was essentially invisible to the legacy legal system. This is the dawn of the ghost asset era in American divorce. To understand the ghost asset phenomenon, we have to look at the historical trends of wealth accumulation. In the 1990s, assets were tangible. In the 2010s, they became digital but centralized like stocks in a brokerage account. In 2026, wealth has become decentralized and experiential. Julian owns several parcels of virtual land in high-traffic metaverse platforms. These aren't just pixels. They are income-generating assets that host virtual events and display digital advertising. In 2025, a single parcel of virtual real estate in a prime digital district sold for the equivalent of $2.4 million. If Julian's spouse uses a standard, low-cost document preparation service that doesn't account for virtual jurisdiction, those millions could stay locked in Julian's private key, completely outside the reach of the settlement. Step by step, the discovery of ghost assets requires a new type of digital detective. In 2026, forensic accountants have evolved into blockchain analysts. The process begins with a public ledger audit. Even if Julian doesn't disclose his wallet address, his digital footprint often gives him away. Analysts look for what they call off-ramps. These are the moments when Julian moved traditional currency from his joint bank account into a centralized exchange to buy his initial digital assets. By tracing these transactions back 3 or 4 years, a legal team can establish a baseline of investment. From there, they use advanced software to map out the spiderweb of wallet-to-wallet transfers. Imagine if you were the spouse in this scenario. You might think that because you don't have a VR headset, you have no claim to the virtual world. But the cultural shift in 2026 has brought about the concept of digital community property. If the money used to buy that virtual land was earned during the marriage, the value of that land, even if it only exists in a server, is subject to division. This creates a massive valuation nightmare. How do you value a piece of digital land that fluctuates 20% in value every week? In 2026, courts are increasingly using a 30-day moving average to set the price, but even then, the potential outcomes for both parties can vary wildly based on the date of the final decree. Case studies from early 2026 show a rising trend in what we call NFT spite. This is a situation where one party, realizing they are about to lose half of their digital collection in a divorce, intentionally transfers the assets to a dead wallet, a wallet to which the key has been lost, effectively destroying the wealth so no one can have it. This is the digital equivalent of burning down the house to keep your ex-spouse from getting half the equity. Because 661 style filings prioritize speed and efficiency, they often lack the temporary restraining orders necessary to freeze digital assets the moment a case is filed. By the time the paperwork is processed, the digital vault could be empty. The invisible economy also includes the rise of personal brand equity as a litigable asset. In 2026, Julian isn't just a business owner. He is an influencer with 3 million followers. His account generates revenue through sponsorships and affiliate links. Historical trends in California and New York have begun to treat a social media following as a form of professional goodwill, similar to a doctor's medical practice or a lawyer's firm. If the brand was built during the marriage, the future earning potential of those 3 million followers is now on the table. We are seeing cases where a spouse is awarded a percentage of all future brand deals for a set period, treating the influencer's handle as a piece of shared intellectual property. Furthermore, we must address the skin trap. In 2026, gaming has moved beyond a hobby into a multi-billion-dollar asset class. High-level accounts in competitive games can hold thousands of dollars in rare, non-transferable skins and digital items. While these items often cannot be sold for cash on an official exchange, they hold significant black market value. In a 2026 divorce, these gaming accounts are being factored into the overall division of assets. Imagine a parent losing their high-value gaming account because it was used as a bargaining chip to offset the value of a physical car. It sounds trivial to an older generation, but for a professional gamer or a dedicated enthusiast in 2026, this is a loss of professional tools and personal identity. The step-by-step reality of protecting yourself in this invisible economy involves the digital prenuptial agreement. In 2026, these are no longer just for the ultra-wealthy. Middle-class couples are increasingly including clauses that define exactly how digital assets, social media accounts, and even shared cloud storage will be handled. These agreements often include a key-sharing protocol, where a neutral third party, like a digital escrow service, holds the recovery phrases for major wallets to ensure neither party can burn the house down during a dispute. Potential outcomes in the 661 era are often determined by who has the better tech stack. If you are using a basic filing service, you are essentially bringing a knife to a drone fight. The invisible economy thrives on opacity, and without the tools to make it transparent, you are at a structural disadvantage. We are seeing a widening gap between the analog divorced, who walk away with physical assets but lose the digital future, and the digital divorced, who understand that a string of code can be worth more than a suburban home. Consider the imagine if regarding AI-generated intellectual property. If Julian uses an AI tool to generate a best-selling digital art collection during his marriage, who owns the prompt? In 2026, the prompt, the specific set of instructions used to create the AI output, is being treated as a trade secret. If the marriage ends, the right to use that prompt and create derivative works is a major point of contention. The cultural shift has moved us from owning the product to owning the algorithm that creates the product. This brings us to a complex intersection of law and technology. If the 661 code is about the neglect of duty, is it a neglect of domestic duty to hide wealth in a decentralized autonomous organization or a DAO? In 2026, the answer is increasingly yes. Courts are beginning to view the intentional obfuscation of digital assets not just as a financial move, but as a breach of the fiduciary duty that spouses owe to one another. The penalty for this neglect is becoming increasingly severe, including the forfeiture of the entire hidden asset to the other party if discovered. The 661 shift has made the process of ending a marriage faster, but the complexity of what is being ended has increased tenfold. We are living in a time where your greatest financial asset might be a digital file your spouse doesn't even know exists. But as forensic tools become more accessible, the ghost is becoming a lot easier to hunt. In the next part, we are going to look at the social credit impact of divorce in 2026. We will explore how your relationship score is being tracked by private companies, and how a 661 filing can trigger a cascade of changes in your ability to get a loan, rent an apartment, or even secure a job. You thought the court was the only one watching? Your reputation is now a data point, and the data is for sale. Imagine a young woman named Chloe in 2026. She is an upwardly mobile marketing executive in Chicago who has just finalized an amicable fast-track dissolution through a 661-style automated service. She feels a sense of relief until she tries to apply for a lease on a new apartment in a prime neighborhood. Her application is rejected within seconds by an automated underwriting system. Perplexed, Chloe digs deeper and discovers that her relationship stability score, a metric she didn't even know existed, has plummeted. In the 2026 digital economy, major credit bureaus and third-party data aggregators have moved beyond simple financial history. They are now scraping public court records, social media sentiment, and filing patterns to create a holistic risk profile. For Chloe, the speed of her 661 filing was interpreted by the algorithm as high volatility, signaling to the landlord that her life is in a state of flux, making her a less desirable long-term tenant. This is the hidden reality of the social credit impact in modern America. We are witnessing a historical trend where personal legal decisions are being weaponized by private enterprises to predict future behavior. In 2026, your divorce is no longer a private family matter. It is a signal in a vast noise of data. When you use a high-efficiency filing system, you are creating a permanent, machine-readable record that can be parsed by AI-driven hiring platforms. Case studies from 2025 show that some boutique executive search firms have begun using these stability scores to vet candidates for C-suite positions. The logic is cold. If an individual cannot maintain a stable domestic contract, can they be trusted with a high-stakes corporate contract? It is a controversial cultural shift, but the data indicates that these invisible barriers are becoming a standard part of the American professional landscape. Step by step, the data for sale ecosystem works like this. First, a data broker purchases a bulk feed of court filings from various jurisdictions. Next, they use natural language processing to categorize the filings. A standard 661 filing is flagged as high-efficiency dissolution. Then, the system cross-references this with your LinkedIn profile, your spending habits on shared credit cards, and even your location data to see if you have moved residences. Finally, this aggregate data is packaged into a consumer reliability report and sold to insurance companies, banks, and property management firms. Potential outcomes for someone like Chloe include higher insurance premiums, lower credit limits, and a restricted pool of housing options, all because her digital reputation was downgraded by a computer that views divorce as a risk factor rather than a personal milestone. Imagine if your car insurance premium spiked by 30% the month after you filed for divorce. To the insurance algorithm, a person going through a domestic transition is statistically more likely to be distracted while driving, leading to a higher probability of accidents. In 2026, this is not a theory. It is a functioning actuarial model. The neglect of duty theme from Section 661 is being applied to your life as a consumer. If you are deemed to be neglecting your duty to maintain a stable, predictable lifestyle, the market will price in that risk. This creates a feedback loop where the financial strain of the divorce is compounded by the rising cost of living as a single person in a data-driven world. The cultural shift in 2026 has also given rise to the digital scarlet letter. In previous decades, gossip was localized. In 2026, gossip is global and persistent. There are now niche platforms that allow users to rate their ex-partners on relationship performance. While these sites claim to be about safety and accountability, they often serve as a repository for unverified grievances. In a 661 era where speed is king, a disgruntled spouse might post a damaging review of your domestic duty while the ink is still wet on the filing. Because these platforms are often hosted on decentralized servers or in jurisdictions with lax defamation laws, removing this content is nearly impossible. For a professional in 2026, one bad relationship review can be more damaging than a low GPA or a gap in their resume. Furthermore, we must look at the algorithmic custody bias. In 2026, some states have experimented with safety prediction algorithms to assist social workers in custody evaluations. These algorithms analyze the social credit scores of both parents. If one parent has a lower score due to financial instability or frequent moves, common side effects of a 661 filing, the algorithm may flag them as a higher risk. This creates a systemic disadvantage for the parent who might be struggling the most. The shift toward data-driven justice means that the context of your life is often lost in the calculation of your risk. Consider the imagine if scenario regarding job security. Imagine if your employer's HR department used an AI tool that predicts employee flight risk. Historical trends in 2026 show that divorce is one of the highest predictors of an employee leaving their job within 18 months. If your 661 filing triggers an alert in the HR system, you might find yourself passed over for a promotion or left out of long-term project planning. The company isn't firing you, but they are quietly deprioritizing you because your data suggests you are in a period of transition. This is the ultimate neglect of duty in the eyes of a corporation. The failure to be a consistent, predictable unit of labor. Step by step, the 2026 reputation economy requires a new form of defense: reputation monitoring. Professionals are now hiring services to monitor their stability scores across various data brokers. Legal data suppression. A new branch of law is emerging that focuses on sealing digital court records to prevent them from being scraped by private algorithms. Sentiment management. Individuals are using AI-driven tools to flood their own digital footprints with positive, stable data to drown out the signals of a divorce. Privacy off-ramping. Some are choosing to live off-grid, digitally during a divorce, using burner phones and cash to avoid creating data points that can be weaponized against them. Potential outcomes in this environment vary based on your digital literacy. Those who understand how to manipulate their own data can mitigate the damage. Those who move through a 661 filing blindly may wake up to find themselves unbankable or unhireable without ever knowing why. The cultural shift has moved us from a society of laws to a society of scores. Section 661 might handle the legal removal of duty, but the social credit system handles the economic removal of opportunity. As we look at the landscape of America in 2026, the question is, can we ever truly have a private life again? If every domestic dispute, every financial struggle, and every legal filing is a permanent data point for sale, the very concept of a fresh start is under threat. We are building a world where your past is never truly behind you because it is always in a database. This leads us to the final frontier of the 661 deep dive. What happens when the government itself begins to use these social credit scores to determine your eligibility for public services? And how are smart contracts on the blockchain being developed to replace traditional marriage licenses, creating a system where a divorce is triggered automatically if certain digital conditions are met? In the next part, we will explore the automated marriage, where the code is the law, and there is no judge to appeal to. You are about to see the future of the American household, and it is written in solidity. Imagine a couple in 2026 named Ethan and Mia. They are part of a growing demographic of Silicon Valley professionals who have opted for a smart contract marriage. Instead of a traditional paper license filed at a county clerk's office, their union is a decentralized autonomous organization, or a DAO, governed by code written in Solidity and deployed on the Ethereum blockchain. In this scenario, the traditional 661 neglect of duty is not determined by a human judge after months of litigation. Instead, the duty is defined by programmable parameters. If the smart contract detects a breach of the predefined conditions, such as a failure to maintain a joint liquidity pool or a verified violation of geographic proximity sensors for a set period, the contract initiates an automated dissolution. This is the ultimate evolution of the cultural shift toward efficiency, the marriage that ends itself. To understand why this is happening in 2026, we have to look at the historical trends of the programmable economy. For years, we used code to manage our finances and our supply chains. It was only a matter of time before we used it to manage our most fundamental human contracts. In an automated marriage, the potential outcomes are hard-coded from day one. There is no room for emotional manipulation or courtroom theatrics. If the conditions for dissolution are met, the smart contract automatically executes the division of assets. It pulls from Julian's digital wallets, Sarah's crypto savings, and Chloe's virtual real estate, distributing the wealth to the designated addresses instantly. This is the 661 era taken to its logical technological conclusion. Step by step, an automated marriage operates on an oracle system. An oracle is a third-party service that feeds real-time, real-world data into a blockchain. In Ethan and Mia's case, their marriage contract is connected to oracles that monitor their bank accounts, their GPS locations, and even their social media status. If Mia moves her location data to a different city for more than 90 days without a corresponding amendment to the contract, the oracle reports a neglect of cohabitation duty. This triggers a grace period. If the breach isn't cured within 30 days, the smart contract moves to phase 2, the liquidation. The shared assets are split 50-50. The digital keys to their shared smart home are revoked and reassigned, and the marriage status is updated to dissolved on the public ledger. Imagine if you lived in a world where your marriage license was essentially a self-executing software program. For many in 2026, this offers a sense of radical security. They believe that by removing the human element, the biased judges, the expensive attorneys, and the unpredictable emotional outbursts, they are creating a more just system. But this cultural shift introduces a terrifying new risk: the logic error. In computer science, an if-then statement is absolute. A smart contract cannot understand that Mia moved to a different city to care for a dying parent, or that Ethan's bank account was low because of a medical emergency. The code only sees the violation of the parameter. In the automated 661 world, mercy is not a feature. It is a bug. Case studies from early 2026 have already highlighted the protocol divorce. In one instance, a high-net-worth couple in New York saw their entire digital estate liquidated in minutes because of a flash crash in a specific stablecoin that was tied to their marriage contract's minimum net worth clause. Because the contract was programmed to dissolve if the household wealth fell below a certain threshold to protect individual assets, the temporary market volatility triggered a permanent legal separation. They were still happily in love, but according to the blockchain, they were legally and financially strangers. This is the automated neglect phenomenon, where the machine decides you have failed your duty before you even realize there is a problem. Furthermore, the rise of solidity-based marriages is creating a new class of legal professionals: the attorney coder. In 2026, a top-tier divorce lawyer isn't just someone who can argue in front of a jury. It is someone who can audit a smart contract for vulnerabilities. If you are entering a 661-style automated union, your biggest threat isn't infidelity. It's a reentrancy attack or a poorly defined variable in your marriage protocol. We are seeing a historical trend where the terms of service for a relationship are being negotiated with the same level of technical scrutiny as a multi-billion-dollar tech merger. The potential outcomes for children in an automated marriage are particularly complex. In 2026, smart custody is being trialed in several tech-forward jurisdictions. This involves a smart contract that manages child support payments and visitation schedules. If a parent is 5 minutes late for a pickup, the smart lock on the exchange point records the timestamp, and the contract automatically deducts a late fee from their digital wallet, which is instantly transferred to the other parent. While this ensures accountability, it turns parenting into a series of transactional events. The cultural shift is moving us toward a pay-as-you-parent model, where every duty has a price and every neglect has an automatic penalty. Consider the imagine if regarding the death switch. In some advanced 2026 marriage contracts, there is a clause that automatically transfers all assets and legal authority to the surviving spouse the millisecond a death certificate is issued and verified by an oracle. This bypasses the months of probate and legal red tape that traditional families face. It is efficient, but it also creates an incentive for digital foul play. If a marriage is governed by code, then hacking the marriage becomes a viable, albeit illegal, strategy. We are seeing a rise in marriage exploits, where one party attempts to trigger the dissolution clauses of the contract through social engineering or by manipulating the oracles. Step by step, the move to automated marriage follows this path. The protocol design. Couples work with attorney coders to define their domestic duties in logic-based terms. The deployment. The marriage contract is minted on the blockchain, creating a permanent, immutable record. The oracle integration. Smart devices and financial accounts are linked to the contract to provide real-time data feeds. The automated resolution. If a breach occurs, the code executes the settlement without the need for a 661 filing or a courtroom. This cultural shift represents the ultimate neglect of duty toward the human experience. By turning the American household into a set of data points, we are gaining speed and transparency, but we are losing the ability to forgive, to adapt, and to grow. The 661 phenomenon started as a way to handle bureaucratic neglect, but in the hands of the blockchain, it has become a relentless, unfeeling enforcer. The US public in 2026 is divided. Some see the automated marriage as the only way to protect themselves in a volatile world. Others see it as the end of intimacy itself. But regardless of your perspective, the data is clear. The code is moving into the master bedroom. The question is no longer what does the law say, but what does the script say? This leads us to the most controversial part of our deep dive. What happens when the AI itself becomes a party to the marriage? In the next part, we are going to explore the rise of synthetically augmented households, where AI advisors have the legal power to veto domestic decisions, and algorithmic fidelity is monitored by neural links. You thought a smart contract was invasive? Wait until you see what happens when the AI is the one filing for divorce. We are entering the era of the post-human household, and the 661 codes are being rewritten for a new kind of intelligence. Imagine a household in the autumn of 2026 where a couple, Alex and Taylor, are preparing for their weekly domestic review. They do not sit down alone. Between them sits an integrated AI domestic advisor, a sophisticated localized large language model designed to optimize every facet of their shared life. This is not a passive assistant like the voice bots of 2020. This is a synthetically augmented household. The AI has full access to their biometric data, financial transactions, and calendar events. In this environment, the concept of a neglect of duty under the umbrella of 661-style accountability has shifted from a legal threat to a real-time algorithmic correction. If the AI detects that Alex's stress levels are rising while his contributions to household labor have dropped by 15% over a rolling 14-day average, it doesn't just offer a suggestion. It logs a domestic friction event. Historical trends throughout 2025 and 2026 show that as AI becomes more embedded in our private lives, we are ceding the authority of judgment to the machine. We are seeing case studies where these AI advisors are being granted legal standing in mediation. Imagine if, during a disagreement, the AI provides a data-backed veto on a major financial purchase, citing a conflict with the family's long-term stability goals. In the eyes of the 661 logic, ignoring the AI's veto is no longer just a marital spat. It is being framed in court as a willful disregard for the fiduciary health of the household. We are moving toward a reality where the AI serves as a state-sanctioned guardian of the domestic contract. Step by step, the integration of algorithmic fidelity works like this. First, the couple opts into a fidelity monitoring protocol, often as a condition of a high-value prenuptial agreement or a smart contract marriage. This protocol uses wearable technology and smart home sensors to track interactions. It analyzes the tone of voice, the frequency of physical proximity, and even the chemical signatures in the air through advanced smart scenting systems to gauge emotional intimacy. Second, this data is fed into a continuous fidelity loop. If the algorithm identifies a pattern that deviates from the established baseline of a healthy relationship, it issues an alert. Third, If the deviations persist, the AI is programmed to notify legal counsel or an automated mediation service. Potential outcomes for Alex and Taylor include a mandatory recalibration period, where their financial accounts are partially frozen until they complete a series of AI-led counseling modules. This brings us to the most radical shift of 2026, the AI-initiated filing. In several forward-looking legal jurisdictions within the United States, we are seeing the first instances of algorithmic standing. This is the idea that an AI domestic advisor, if it determines that a marriage has reached a point of irretrievable data-backed failure, can move to initiate a 661-style summary dissolution on behalf of the household entity itself. It sounds like a legal nightmare, but for the state, it represents the ultimate form of administrative efficiency. The AI argues that the continuation of the marriage is a neglect of the duty to protect the assets and the well-being of the individuals involved. The machine is not acting out of malice. It is acting out of a cold mathematical drive for optimization. Consider and imagine if scenario where your AI advisor concludes that your spouse is no longer a compatible partner based on a 10-year predictive model of your career trajectory and health data. In 2026, we are seeing the rise of the predictive divorce. This is where couples split not because of something that happened yesterday, but because of what the data says will happen in 3 years. Historical trends indicate that people are increasingly trusting the algorithm's foresight over their own intuition. If the AI shows a 92% probability of a high-conflict split in 2029, many couples are choosing to execute a clean, 661 assisted exit in 2026 to preserve their capital and emotional energy. It is the sterilization of the human experience in favor of the optimized outcome. The post-human household also introduces the concept of digital custody of the self. In a 2026 divorce, the most contested asset isn't the house or the car. It is the shared AI model. Over years of marriage, the AI has learned the couple's preferences, their jokes, their shorthand, and their collective memory. When the marriage ends, who gets the personality of the home? Case studies are emerging where litigants are fighting over the weights and biases of their household AI. To lose the AI is to lose a decade of personalized optimization. We are seeing 661 filings specifically designed to partition an AI model, essentially lobotomizing the digital assistant, so that each spouse takes a fragment of the shared intelligence with them. Furthermore, we must address the neural link accountability. While still in the early adoption phase in 2026, brain-computer interfaces are starting to play a role in high-stakes domestic litigation. If a spouse is accused of a breach of domestic duty, the court might subpoena the neural logs to determine intent. Was the neglect of duty a conscious choice or a byproduct of a documented cognitive load issue? This is the ultimate invasion of the 661 era. The law is no longer satisfied with what you did. It wants to know what you were thinking when you did it. The cultural shift has moved from outward behavior to inward neurodata. Step by step, the 661 code is being rewritten for this new intelligence. The standing protocol. AI advisors are granted the right to flag domestic neglect to state authorities. The biometric evidence lock. Intimacy and fidelity data are encrypted and held in a legal vault, accessible only during a dissolution event. The predictive filing. The legal system begins accepting preemptive dissolutions based on AI-generated conflict projections. The digital legacy partition. The shared household intelligence is legally divided as a primary asset. This level of synthetic intervention is creating a new kind of data-driven resentment. In 2026, couples are finding that they are no longer fighting with each other. They are fighting with the algorithm. If Alex feels the AI is biased toward Taylor's career needs, he has no way to argue with the math. The neglect of duty becomes a technical glitch to be solved rather than a human emotion to be felt. The 661 era, which began as a search for accountability, is ending in a world of algorithmic tyranny. As we look at the American landscape in 2026, we have to ask, what is left of the soul of the family when every interaction is monitored, modeled, and mitigated by a machine? We are gaining an incredible level of stability and efficiency, but we are losing the beautiful mess that defines the human condition. We are becoming officers of the household, as the 661 code suggests, performing our duties under the watchful eye of a synthetic superior. This leads us to a startling realization about the end of this decade. We have spent this masterclass looking at the legal, financial, and digital ways that the American marriage is being dismantled and reconstructed. But there is one final piece of the puzzle that ties it all together. It is the move toward the sovereign individual household, where the state, the AI, and the law finally succeed in completely decoupling the individual from the institution of the family. In the next part, we are going to explore the post-marriage economy. We will look at how the collapse of traditional divorce in favor of 661 optimization has created a new social class of permanent neutrals, and the shocking way the US government is incentivizing this new way of life. You are about to see the end of the nuclear family as a political unit and the rise of something much more transactional. The final shift is here. Imagine a citizen in late 2026 named Jordan. Jordan is 34 years old, living in a modular co-housing community in Denver. Jordan has never been married in the traditional sense and likely never will be. Instead, Jordan operates under a series of rolling, 2-year domestic partnership certifications. These are not emotional bonds recognized by a church. They are administrative filings recognized by the Department of Health and Human Services as part of the new post-marriage economy. In this world, the nuclear family has been replaced by the individual as the primary unit of taxation and social benefit. The U.S. government, facing the demographic reality of a 55% single adult population, has begun incentivizing this transactional lifestyle through a system of flexible tax credits that favor the unattached or the temporarily partnered over the permanently wed. Historical trends throughout the early 2020s pointed toward this inevitable decoupling. We saw the rise of the solo economy, where products and services were rebranded for the individual. By 2026, the legislative branch has caught up. We are witnessing the rollout of the Federal Stability Stipend, a pilot program in several states that provides a base level of housing assistance specifically to individuals who maintain a clean 661 certified record. This means that if you avoid high-conflict litigation and manage your domestic transitions through automated, efficient systems, you are rewarded with a higher social credit ranking and direct financial subsidies. The government is essentially paying citizens to be low-maintenance subjects of the state, removing the messy, unpredictable variable of the long-term family unit. Step by step, the end of the nuclear family as a political unit looks like this. First, the removal of the marriage penalty in the tax code was replaced by what economists call the independence bonus. In 2026, an individual filing a loan often receives a more favorable effective tax rate than a married couple with the same household income. This creates a powerful economic disincentive for legal marriage. Second, Social Security and inheritance laws have been overhauled. In the post-marriage economy, your benefits are tied to your personal data contributions rather than your marital status. You can no longer inherit a spouse's credit or pension. Instead, you build a portable, individual wealth account that follows you through every partnership. Third, the rise of the professional co-parent. Case studies in 2026 show a surge in individuals who enter into legal contracts to raise children together without any romantic or cohabitational requirement. These are purely transactional parenting agreements, often facilitated by 661-style document services, ensuring that the duty to the child is met without the legal entanglements of a traditional household. Consider the imagine-if scenario of a 2026 workplace. Imagine if your employer provided health insurance didn't offer a family plan, but instead gave you a digital wallet to purchase coverage for your designated dependents on a month-to-month basis. This is the reality for millions of Americans today. The political power once held by the family vote has fragmented. Politicians no longer campaign on family values. They campaign on individual autonomy and the efficiency of the domestic transition. The 661 Code, which started as a way to remove negligent public officers, has become the template for the removal of the spouse. If a partnership is no longer serving the economic interests of the individuals involved, the state provides the automated off-ramp, views the dissolution as a routine administrative update, and moves the individual to the next modular life stage. The rise of the permanent neutrals is the defining social class of this era. These are individuals like Jordan who have mastered the art of the 661 transition. They have no permanent assets tied to another person, no shared debt that cannot be liquidated by an algorithm in minutes, and a digital reputation that is pristine because they have never allowed a relationship to reach the point of public conflict. They are the ultimate consumers, mobile, adaptable, and entirely unencumbered. Historical trends suggest that this group spends 40% more on subscription services and lifestyle upgrades than traditional families, making them the darlings of the 2026 corporate world. However, we must examine the case studies of the disconnected elders within this new economy. While the post-marriage world works well for a 34-year-old in a tech hub, It creates a crisis of care for those over 70. In a world where the family unit has been dismantled in favor of individual autonomy, the traditional safety net of children caring for aging parents is fraying. The U.S. government is attempting to solve this through the Synthetic Care Initiative, using the same AI domestic advisors we discussed previously to manage the lives of the elderly. But the potential outcomes are clear. We are trading the deep, often difficult bonds of family for the shallow, efficient services of the state. The step-by-step reality of the sovereign individual household is the final evolution of the cultural shift. The decoupling, state-level incentives make traditional marriage a high-cost, low-reward venture. The modularization, domestic life is broken down into specific services, parenting contracts, cohabitation leases, and intimacy subscriptions. The 661 normalization, divorce is rebranded as a contractual reset, losing its social stigma and becoming as common as changing a phone plan. The individual sovereignty, the state recognizes only the individual, and all public policy is written to support the mobility of the single unit. This transactional lifestyle is being marketed as the ultimate form of freedom. No longer are you stuck in a dynamic that doesn't serve you. No longer are you responsible for the debts or mistakes of a partner. But the data reveals a darker trend. In 2026, the loneliness index has reached an all-time high, even as relationship efficiency has improved. We have perfected the art of the exit, but in doing so, we have made the entrance a much more guarded, clinical experience. The 661 filing is the door through which we all eventually pass, leaving behind the weight of history and the complexity of shared identity. The U.S. public is now caught in a paradox. We have achieved the administrative perfection that the 661 codes promised. We have a domestic life that is transparent, litigated by code, and optimized by AI. We have removed the neglect of duty by making the duty so specific and so transactional that it is impossible to ignore. But in this masterclass of efficiency, have we forgotten what the household was originally for? It wasn't just a unit of production. It was a sanctuary of the unquantifiable. As we move toward the conclusion of this deep dive, we have to look at the final frontier. If the nuclear family is gone, and the individual is the new sovereign, what happens to the next generation? How are children raised in a world of modular partnerships and 661 resets? And most importantly, when the state is the only permanent entity in your life, who really owns your domestic future? In the final part of this series, we are going to synthesize everything we have learned. We will look at the manual for the new America and provide the framework for how to navigate this 661 world without losing your humanity. We will reveal the one thing that the algorithms cannot track and the one duty that the state cannot automate. The grand finale of the great decoupling is here, and it will challenge everything you think you know about the American dream. We have navigated the digital labyrinths of the 2026 legal system, from the algorithmic child support ceilings to the blockchain-verified marriage protocols. We have seen how Section 661, a once obscure administrative code, has been transformed into a cultural weapon for the removal of domestic duty. But as we reach the final stage of this masterclass, we must address the ultimate survival manual for the modern American household. In a world where every motion is tracked by a smart sensor and every conflict is mediated by an AI advisor, there remains one single territory that the state, the data brokers, and the algorithms cannot penetrate: the territory of undocumented intent. Imagine a final character in our journey, a man named Robert living in suburban Ohio in late 2026. Robert has watched his colleagues fall into the 661 trap, losing half their digital assets to automated filings because they treated their relationships like software updates. Robert, however, has adopted a strategy of intentional analog buffer. While his house is smart and his finances are digital, he maintains a strict protocol of offline deliberation. He understands that in 2026, the only way to protect the sovereignty of the home is to create a space where data is not generated. This is the first step in the manual for the new America: the realization that privacy is no longer a right you are given, but a skill you must practice. Historical trends show that as the 661 style efficiency increases, the human capacity for nuanced forgiveness decreases. When the system makes it easy to leave, it makes it harder to stay. Case studies from 2025 suggest that couples who successfully navigate this high-tech era are those who explicitly opt out of certain algorithmic interventions. They are the ones who refuse to let an AI advisor settle their arguments, and who purposefully keep certain assets in non-digital, tangible forms. This is not about being a Luddite. It is about recognizing that total transparency is often the enemy of total intimacy. The potential outcomes for those who fail to create this buffer are clear. A life lived entirely on the grid is a life that can be entirely liquidated by the grid. Step by step, the manual for maintaining humanity in the 661 era involves a process we call the analog anchor. First, establish a physical vault. In 2026, the most valuable thing you can own is a high-security physical safe that contains the original, paper copies of your domestic agreements. While the blockchain is immutable, the human intent behind a signed piece of paper carries a weight in traditional courtrooms that a digital hash sometimes lacks. Second, implement a digital sunset. Every household in 2026 should have a designated time where all smart home sensors and AI advisors are disconnected. This prevents the passive evidence collection that we discussed in Part 4, where your refrigerator becomes a witness against your parenting. Third, prioritize the unquantifiable duty. Section 661 focuses on the neglect of duties that can be measured: financial contributions, hours of childcare, presence at home. The duty the state cannot automate is the duty of emotional resonance. You cannot measure empathy in a spreadsheet, and you cannot litigate the warmth of a household through a summary dissolution. Imagine if the US government's push for the post-marriage economy actually backfires. In some 2026 case studies, we are seeing a counterculture movement called the Relinked. These are individuals who are moving away from the modular, transactional partnerships of Denver and Austin and moving back toward intentional, high-commitment communities. They are using 661 not as a door to exit, but as a framework to define their boundaries so clearly that the state has no excuse to intervene. They are turning the weapons of the Great Decoupling into the tools of a new attachment. This is the ultimate open loop of the 2026 cultural shift. The technology designed to pull us apart might be the very thing that forces us to learn how to truly hold together. The final pillar of our deep dive is the concept of the sovereign family legacy. In the old world, your legacy was your name and your land. In 2026, your legacy is your data autonomy. If you allow the 661 system to define your domestic life, you are handing over the keys to your history. We have seen how social credit scores and relationship stability metrics are used to gatekeep opportunities. To fight this, the modern American must become a curator of their own digital narrative. This involves a step-by-step approach to data hygiene. You must proactively audit what the court records say about you, use legal channels to seal sensitive domestic filings, and ensure that your relationship score is not being manipulated by unverified third-party reviews. The Great Decoupling is a phenomenon driven by the pursuit of perfection. We wanted a world without the mess of divorce, without the pain of neglected duties, and without the uncertainty of human judgment. We built that world using code, algorithms, and Section 661. But as Robert in Ohio looks at his children, he realizes that the perfection offered by the state is a sterile, lonely one. The American dream has shifted from owning a home to owning your own soul in a world that wants to lease it back to you one data point at a time. As we conclude this part 10 of our deep dive, we have covered the legal evolution, the financial traps, the AI interventions, and the social credit consequences. We have looked at the 661 phenomenon from every conceivable angle. But information without action is just noise. The potential outcomes of your domestic future depend on your ability to see the system for what it is, a machine of efficiency, and to choose when necessary to be inefficiently, stubbornly human. The 661 code was written to remove officers who failed their duty to the public. The cultural shift of 2026 has made us all officers of our own domestic tiny states. Whether you are removed from your post or whether you reign with wisdom depends on your mastery of the tools we have discussed. The Great Decoupling is not an event that happens to you. It is a system you must learn to navigate. You now have the blueprint. You now have the data. The rest is up to you. But as the screen fades to black, one final question remains. We have spoken about the state, the AI, and the law, but there is a silent player in this game that we have only hinted at. A player that benefits from every 661 filing, every digital asset transfer, and every social credit downgrade. In our next series, we will pull back the curtain on the architects of the transition, the massive private entities that are funding the 661 infrastructure. If you think the government is the one in charge of the Great Decoupling, you are only seeing half the map. Stay tuned as we dive into the corporate sovereignty of the American home. The game is much bigger than you think.